Good afternoon, and we start by apologizing for the delay, but as you understood, there was a technical problem in having the online and the running the slides for the online. So we are here live, and we have also some people online, so thank you very much. Hopefully the problem is solved, and we will be able to move on with our presentation. Welcome to this discussion roundtable on obesity, the invisible pandemic. It's trying to develop or promote a policy book for a healthier Europe. I want to start thanking MEP D'Amato for hosting this event with us at Competere, considering it's the very last week of the Parliament, so a few days, and then we move to the election. And please join me in wishing MEP D'Amato all the best luck for a re-election, or a quick re-election, or abundant re-election of votes. Thank you so much. I will start right away. I will actually give the conclusion at the end as a wrap-up of the entire discussion. Our goal is to understand how the next Parliament and the next Commission, or contribute to the next Parliament and Commission, in order to develop effective policies in attempting to solve or mitigate what is an invisible pandemic. And the invisible pandemic is obesity. And as you know, the number of obesity, and Professor Karuba shortly will highlight some of these numbers, are very dramatic. And it seems that current policies worldwide, not just in the EU, are not solving the problem. So what we want to figure out is how we can effectively challenge the problem and bring to the table more solutions than what the European Union or the European Commission has done so far. And as you know, there has been a big discussion, particularly on the frontal package, but with very, very little results. So we do hope that the next Parliament and the next Commission will be able to have more effective policy-making process, and as well policies produced. Likewise, we would like these policies to avoid unintended consequences. And this is, as you follow some of our discussion last week, we highlighted the risk of unintended consequences on some of the most recent European policies. And with MEP D'Amato, perhaps we disagree on certain issues, particularly when it comes to farm to fork, but certainly in some cases the Commission did not do a precise assessment, or did not base its decision on scientific-based data. But anyway, we will have the chance to understand today what obesity is and why we need a broader set of policies than what the European Commission has been discussing for the past 5 years. So I leave the floor, and I will be the moderator. So my role will be exclusively to pass the microphone. We will have some speakers that you can see in the agenda in front of you, together with the bio. Their presentations will be uploaded on our website, so will be made available, and you will be free to download them. And we will also prepare a summary of our discussion. This is again one of the series of steps that we are doing. We are organizing another closed door discussion, in this case in Madrid in a month from now, and another one in Milan at the end of June, and hopefully maybe again with MEP D'Amato, next one in September or October here, once you'll be re-elected, or some of your colleagues, to be more pragmatic. Joking aside, this is the housekeeping I made. My role will be to pass the microphone to all the speakers that we have, that are well represented in terms of male and females, and also geographically well represented. Actually, MEP D'Amato, being from the extreme south of Europe, was complaining that all the speakers were from extreme north of Europe. But this was in terms of European diversity. Again, I like to stress this because the way we form our panels is always based not on gender and race, but is based on the quality and the content that speakers are providing. But of course, we also like to represent geographically the entire Europe or broader than Europe, and obviously people of any color, any race, or any gender as well. So this is very important for us as well. So finally, I leave the floor to you. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here with us.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Competere and to Pietro to organize this event. And thank you for being here today and for addressing one of the most pressing health crises of our time, obesity. This is not merely a matter of personal health, but a societal issue that demands our urgent attention and collective action. According to the data, obesity rates have been on the rise globally, reaching alarming levels. The science behind obesity is clear. It is a complex interplay of genetic, environmental, and societal factors. We cannot ignore the statistics. Globally, obesity rates have nearly tripled since 1975. In Europe alone, over half of adults are considered overweight, a condition that worsens with age. The coronavirus pandemic has further exacerbated the problem. Estimates indicate that by 2035, about 2 billion people will be living with obesity, and the projected global economic impact of overweight and obesity will reach more than $4 trillion. This is not just a health issue. This is not just about lower quality of life for people or about a decline in life expectancy, but also an economic burden, costing billions in healthcare expenditures and loss of productivity. But behind these numbers, there are real people, families struggling with the consequences of the obesity. It is about children whose futures are jeopardized by the preventable health conditions like type diabetes, heart disease, and certain cancers. It is about the inequalities that exacerbate the problem, with disadvantaged communities disproportionately affected by limited access to healthy food options and safe spaces for physical activity. We must take decisive action at all levels, from individual choices to public policies, to counter this plague that affects our society. First and foremost, we must prioritize education and awareness. People need access to accurate information about nutrition, the importance of physical activity, and the risks associated with obesity. This education must start early, in the family, in schools, communities, fostering healthy habits from childhood. An example is the Youth for Health work program of the European Commission that tackles, in particular, childhood obesity by increasing awareness, sharing knowledge, and developing best practices. Furthermore, we need to address the environmental factors that contribute to obesity. These include ensuring that all communities have access to affordable, nutritious food options. It also means creating environments that promote physical activity, whether through urban planning that prioritizes walkability and green spaces, or policies that support active transportation. European Week of Sport is a good EU Commission example in this sense that fights physical inactivities. Additionally, we must hold the food industry accountable to their role in promoting unhealthy eating habits. This may involve implementing regulation on advertising to children, improving food labeling to empower consumers to make informed choices. I'm not talking about not front of package labeling of the European Commission, of course, and incentivizing the production and marketing healthier food options. Finally, we cannot overlook the importance of healthcare interventions in addressing obesity. This includes ensuring access to obesity prevention, first of all, and treatment services, as well as promoting research to effective interventions and treatments. But let me be clear, addressing obesity requires a collective effort. It's not just up to individuals to make healthier choices. It's up all of us, politicians, businesses, communities, and individuals, to work together to create a healthier future for generations to come. The data is clear. The stakes are high, and the consequences of inaction have terrible impacts in our societies. With determination and commitment, we aim to build a world where obesity is no longer a barrier. And now, I'm now looking forward to hearing the intervention of our speakers, and thank you for your speeches.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for your introduction and for highlighting some of the main challenges that we have ahead. Among the numbers that now Professor Karuba will provide, there is obviously one of the most shocking number that Professor Karuba was one of the first to present, the fact that by 2030, if there is no reduction in obesity, but actually the increase constantly grows, we will have, for the first time in human history, a reduction of life expectancy. And this, I think, it's a complete failure of humanity. MEP D'Amato also highlighted the need for everybody in our society to take the challenge together. So what we tried to do today is to bring together scientists from a very different background, medical background, but also social and economic background. Now I'm introducing our first speaker. Also, we have some more people joining the room. Please feel free to sit everywhere, not also on this side of the room, not just to squeeze everybody on that side. Otherwise, it's like packed there and not here. So I leave the floor to Professor Karuba. Professor Karuba has been professor for many years at the University of Milan, and being the author of hundreds of studies, particularly on the issue of obesity. And together with us, Professor Karuba has been launching this scientist coalition to tackle obesity. So Professor Karuba, now the slides should work. So I pass the floor to you. The first two speakers will have 15 minutes, and then we will have a panel discussion of 10 minutes for each speaker. My role is to take the time. I'm talking to Professor Bangal and Professor Karuba, so I will be very strict after the 15 minutes because we really have short time. So floor is yours, Professor. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you to you for organizing this important summit because we have to realize that obesity is the most important, I would say, the most important issue that human being should be faced in the next few years. May I have the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Next slide, please.
Is there a remote work?
Okay. Obesity. No more. Obesity is seen up till now as a problem of aesthetic problem, and people with obesity are stigmatized as they see them as vicious that are unable to control their food intake. But we have to realize that this is true but this is a symptom of a disease which is due to the inhibition of the functioning of a homeostatic mechanism that regulate energy intake and energy expenditure. This is a very complex mechanism that there are several signals that from the periphery goes to the brain, and the brain is that organize all these systems in promoting or reducing food intake and promoting or reducing energy expenditure. When this mechanism doesn't work, you have obesity. Obesity then is a disease, is a chronic disease, is a chronic recurrent disease, and is a disease which is also epidemic. Next slide. Next. Okay, as I've been already told you, you can see here that more than 50%, even 60% of the European people are overweight or obese. Next. Also, the new generation has a problem, has a very high problem. Next. You see that 1/3 child are obese or overweight. And in some countries, including Italy, this is more even worse. The problem is that a child with developed obesity in the age of between 6 and 9 years old has 80 probability to become adult obese. So just making a picture of the childhood obesity, we will know what will happen in the next years. The next slides, indeed, the World Health Organization is calculating that until very few years, 8 or 10 years, people will arrive to have will reach the percentage of people with obesity, not with overweight, but with obesity will arrive to be even more than 30% of the population. And this is very dangerous because, next slide, obesity causes a lot of diseases, pulmonary diseases, non-alcoholic fatty liver diseases, renal diseases, stroke, cardiovascular disease, which are even fatal, stroke, coronary heart disease, diabetes. 95% of type 2 diabetic persons are overweight or obese. Hypertension, 35% of the cancer are linked to obesity. So this is a problem because obese is also in many cases fatal. If we, la prossima, next. This will explain, Professor Luc Van Gaal will explain you why now the science is sure that all these diseases are not simply linked, but are the result of the accumulation of fat in the visceral area. But next, we see that if a person develops obesity at the age between 20 and 40 years old, has reached the possibility to have 80 or 9 years loss of life. But what is very to be stressed that in that occasion you have 20 years of loss of healthy life. So you have at the end 10 years of life lost and 20 years of healthy life lost. And this is a problem because all these diseases cost, and there is a real direct and indirect costs of the obesity, not only for the national health organization, but also for the society, because our indirect costs that people don't produce, lose in production. This is very dangerous if we consider that the next slide, that the New England Journal of Medicine say that if nothing will be done in the next few years, for the first time from the human being, the next generation will have less time, less longevity than the previous generation. And that's is something that never happened from when the human being are in this world. So what to do is, since we know that hyperphagia is not a cause of the obesity, but is a symptom of obesity, but we can prevent obesity just looking at the lifestyle of the person. So each one has the possibility to modify their lifestyle if they have the culture and they have the opportunity to learn and to know how to do. One of the problem is that we are losing the Mediterranean diet tradition. La prossima. The Mediterranean diet has been studied in several thousands of research, and has been demonstrated that that is the most healthy way of eating. Indeed, the principle of the Mediterranean diet is the balance between macronutrients like carbohydrates that should be 60%, lipids 30%, and proteins 10%. And to achieve this balance, Mediterranean diet, which is shown as a pyramid, contains all the indication, how many portion of each food should be eaten every meal or every day or sometime during the week. So the principle of Mediterranean diet, which is characterized by la prossima, next, by low consumption of eggs and cheese, low consumption of red meat and processed meat, low consumption of animal fats, but more consumption on seafood, on whole grains, vegetables and legumes, olive oil, and fresh fruits and nuts. But it's been clearly demonstrated by many research, la prossima, that implementation of at least two of these characteristics of the Mediterranean diet is able to reduce mortality of 20%. This is a very important issue that we have to consider, that just implementing a couple of the characteristics of the Mediterranean diet will reduce mortality by 20%. La prossima. Unfortunately, we are losing the Mediterranean diet habits. At least in Italy, where the Mediterranean diet is most used or more common, you see that 80% from, you don't know whether you can read this, but 80% of people don't consume enough food and vegetables. All the mistakes are in reducing intake and not in excess of intake. The excess of intakes regards only sweet, only processed food and animal food, but you know there is a great there are a lot of percentage of people that don't eat enough. For instance, olive oil is approximately 64, but there is no one that eat more. So we have to realize that this is a great problem. We can educate people, and for instance, most important is to educate child at the school, and if they learn how to manage the nutrition and how to use a physical exercise. Usually a sedentary person spend 5,000 steps every day. Just changing from 5,000 to 10,000, the mortality is reduced by 3 times. 3 times. That's very important to know, because there is no medicine that can do such a miracle.
Prof, 1 minute.
1 minute. And to reach from 5,000 more steps, you need half an hour a day. And it's not necessary to do it together. You can spend 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the mid, and 10 minutes at night. And so you can reach 10,000 steps every day. Just for conclusion, next. Okay. To conclude, we have to address to the European institution that, first of all, obesity should be considered a disease, chronic, epidemic, and fatal. We have to prevent obesity, and to prevent obesity, we have to teach. It is a cultural problem. We have to teach how to eat and how to move. And that's very easy to do, especially if we do when when people are very young, because they learn at that age, they will use it, and then their behavior will rest like that for even when they are older. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. Also, I know you wanted to do it in Italian and struggling with English, but we understood clearly. Unfortunately, again, today there was no possibility to have translation. One point of order for the speakers. Since we don't have technician, the cameras in the room are moving automatically, but probably not sufficiently intelligently, so they're not going up and down. So if you stand next speakers, just make sure that you're looking at the camera, because the camera is not following you, just moving left and right. Otherwise, people from home or in the big screens cannot see you. Thank you, Professor, because you outlined, first of all, the fact that when we talk about diet, we're not just talking about food or the food we eat, but diet from the Greek word is the lifestyle. So when we think about your diet, we're thinking about your lifestyle, and the Greeks have been great masters of knowledge. And second of all, the fact that you outline how obesity should be recognized as a disease, a chronic and epidemic disease, and then the importance, of course, of education. Now, since we want to understand the reasons behind obesity, the causes of obesity, and as we know, there is a big debate, and in some policy makers are too much focused on the nutrients aspect of obesity, so the impact the nutrients have on obesity. Now we try to figure out whether and which are the other reasons behind the epidemic of obesity. So we have here with us, and we are very grateful, Professor Van Gaal from the Antwerp University. Please, the floor is yours. If you want to stand, always keep in mind the camera.
If the camera can look to me, then I will be happy. So, signore
You're a beautiful man anyway.
Signore D'Amato, signor Paganini, molto grazie per questa possibilità di venire in Bruxelles. So the reason for my talk is indeed to give you a view on exploring the causes of obesity. And I think with the very main message is that the EU commissions and the Parliament is going to consider obesity as a disease. It is only when obesity is conceived as a disease that also the stigma that many patients and many individuals will have can be taken away. And that is important because this stigma is linked to the idea that it is overeating, that it is being less physical activity. That is true to some extent, but there is much more than that. I have to report my conflicts of interest. That's what we as physicians have to do. Next, please. So Michele Caruba already looked to that. If your life expectancy at the age of 70 is regular, then it takes away by years and by years. If your body mass increase from 30 to 40, and even if over 40, you will lose many years, and you will have 50% less chance of reaching that age of 70. If we look to obesity, or even at the early beginning with overweight, it is extremely complex. It is complex because there are biological factors, there are also many environmental factors, and the interaction between these two is so crucial, and societal factors. And that creates a balance. And you see in the middle of this slide, with all the different components that may contribute, you see the balance, and unfortunately, the balance is going into the bad direction of fat accumulation. Because we may not forget that it should be fat accumulation where we speak about. It is the excess of fat. Is that what we mean with obesity? If we then look to a reason, because I do not have the time to go in details, but this is just a simple list of elements and contributors to the development of obesity. Some, of course, aspects of lifestyle and nutrition, but genetic factors, sleep disturbances, ladies and gentlemen, inflammation, the gut the pollutants, as we call it, endocrine disruptors. Some people quote even that global warming may lead to obesity. And finally, what doctors sometimes too fast are prescribing some medications. Let's give you just a few ideas. Next, please. This is a dynamic one. This is nice work by a Boston epidemiologist, Frank Hu. I know him very well. He has clearly established that television viewing as part of sedentary lifestyle, each 2 hours per day, extra television watching was associated with a 23% increase in obesity. Children should not be in front of television. They should be outside and playing and being physically active. Next one, please. And then that is in that same aspect of lifestyle, also the nutrition transition with larger portions, with easy food to be consumed, receiving a lot of publicity. As the Member of Parliament has mentioned, the Parliament should take action to avoid that at times that children are looking to television, that they do not receive publicity for unhealthy food. I've never seen on television publicity to eat oranges or to eat kiwis or to eat healthy food. It's mostly fat food. And if we deal with children, that was mentioned already, and as Michele Caruba has mentioned, we should start very early. That is prevention. If you are overweight or obese at the age of 18 already, as we unfortunately see already in Europe around 12 to 15, 16%, if you're obese at 18, the chances that you will have diabetes, heart disease, cancers at the age of 40 is extremely high. So we have to not only to prevent, but also to act very early on. The next one is also dealing with that aspect of how we eat. It is not too much eating, it's sometimes the quality. I think in Europe we are less confronted with what is mentioned there, the fructose sweetened drinks. That is a typical story for the US and for Asia, but it increases mainly the abdominal fat in the belly that is potentially dangerous. And then what is happening in Europe, that is the ultra-processed foods, the ready-to-eat aspects. And yet you can show immediately the next slide. This is also dealing with the portions. What we have seen developing over the last 15 to 20 years, you can see it. It's not a small portion of fries. It's not just small Coke. It is also big and triple and maxi. All these wording is just reflecting what people are consuming, but it is also soliciting for more and more. Next one, please. Physical activity. Again, to take away that stigma, it is not just that people are not willing to be physically active. If you look to the right panel of this part that plays a role in that balance, the physical activity, there are so many reasons why people cannot be physically active. It is not a question of willingness. It is a question of background diseases and situations, a mental state and other aspects that will limit them to be physically active. And I think this is an aspect that doctors should be much more be aware about. Next one. The genes play, of course, a role. I think we know these days, when I started my research in obesity more than 40 years ago, meanwhile, it's unfortunately a long time ago, but then a few genes only were taken and were considered to be responsible. Meanwhile, we know so many genes. It's a polygenetic situation that drives overweight and obesity. I think we can say now that in between 35 to 40% of the ways how and where fat is accumulated, this is driven by genes. So this is again that people should understand, that politicians should understand that it is not a question of will, a question of drive for patients to eat healthy, to be physically active. Also the genes may drive how you eat, whether you are physically active, yes or no. And if you look to a few next slides, you will see that, that you have many studies that have been done, studies in siblings, in adoption studies. That's a nice study. It's a Swedish study from a number of years ago, where children that were adopted, and if they look to them 25 years later, it became clear that the weight was very concordant to the weight of the natural parents. They have never lived with them together. That is important to genes, otherwise than the aspects that the environment may play a role on. So we have monogenetic studies that is done in identical twins, very, very nice studies that have been performed in siblings, and then the adoption studies. And the next slide shows you how complex it is. This is a list of all potential genes that might be involved in the pathogenesis of overweight and obesity. So it's very, very complex. Okay, next one. Sleep. We should teach our children to have a good sleep. This is a nice study from a number of years ago, where the sleep duration of hours, if you sleep less than 5 hours, this will increase the risk of obesity. And it's nicely presented there. If your BMI, your body mass index, will dramatically increase if you just see the difference between 5 hours sleep a night versus 8 hours sleep a night. So these are aspects that play a role. And the next slide will explain to that. The explanation is seen on the lower part, because the time and the hours in bed will determine what with your endogenous hormones will happen. And this is cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, as we all know. And the less we sleep, the higher the cortisol will be. And the cortisol is a driver to enlarge the fat cells, to fill the fat cells with fatty acids, and so obesity may develop. The next slide will go into the aspects of the gut hormones that plays a role. Michele Caruba has shown already a very complex and nice picture of how the hormones and all the biochemical pathways drive our brain to consider whether, when we stop eating, whether we feel full, whether we can say, okay, satiety is accomplished. Hormones play a role in that. And these hormones these days, fortunately, are nowadays also used for pharmacological interventions, and that can be considered as a given breakthrough. You can show the next, and you see here how these different hormones coming from the gut, coming from the pancreas, are driving signals in the brain, and then explaining the energy expenditure. That is the way how our calories are burned at central level. So this is again an example of the complexity of overweight and obesity. Yeah, and the next slide shows you the aspect that is linked with that. That is the aspect of the microbiome. The microbiome is the good bacteria we have in our gut, and this plays this is playing an important role in overall metabolism, in the development of the metabolic syndrome, in the development of type 2 diabetes, but also driving what happens at the level of our individual fat cells. And for instance, the next slide, you will be surprised that I will tell you that not all the classical drinks and the fructose sweetened drinks, as I mentioned before, but that also artificial sweeteners, where a lot of publicity is made for, also artificial sweeteners may alter that good bacterial composition of our gut, and may finally lead to metabolic syndrome and glucose intolerance and obesity. So saying, okay, you don't drink any soft drinks anymore, but you can use non-caloric sweeteners, is not always a good sign. One of the final points is toxic environmental factors. And this is an important point where I consider that the EU Commissions can play a crucial role. This is a graph where you will show that the pollutants and toxic aspects in our environment are progressively increasing over the years. And in the next slide, it becomes clear that this is a list of the so-called pollutants, the endocrine disrupting chemicals. They are in our food, they are in the environment, in nature, and they accumulate in our body. They mainly accumulate in fat cells, and they will, as the next slide will show, they remain there for years. The older you become, slightly different between men and women, but the older you become, the more of these pollutants are in your fat cells. And the longer the duration will be, it is an example of PCBs, the PCB serum levels, according to decades. So this is a reflection that PCBs are in our fat cells, and they entered your body 20 or 30 years ago. I know that in the EU Commissions, there is nowadays already work to ban these pollutants. Bisphenol A in plastics is a very crucial example of that, but still a lot of work has to be done. Okay, we come almost to the end. Just mentioning that work that we have done ourselves indicated that these pollutants are not only entering our fat cells, but these pollutants also entering the beta cell of the pancreas and giving rise to different types of mainly type 2 diabetes. Next slide. As I mentioned, the evidence is not that big, but there are a number of publications and studies that have indicated that population adiposity may be linked to the climate change. The larger, the more overweight or obese individuals are, the more heat they will produce, and this may play a role in the climate change. So this is probably something also to be considered for the Green parties, I believe. So a final point as contributors to obesity is a huge list of drug therapies that will have weight increasing capacities. And the reason why I show that, I don't think that the Commission can deal with these things. Many of these drugs are necessary and are important. The reason why I show it, and we have done the publications and work on that respect, is that also even in an Italian journal, the Journal of Endocrinological Investigation is an Italian journal in English, is that if we treat obese individuals, do not treat them immediately, do always a good, as doctors, assessment. So the education, Madame D'Amato, the education on obesity in children in the schools, the high schools, but also for doctors at universities, they should receive more time on this very public epidemic that we see. You have to perform a good assessment. What is the reason why Mr. X or Lady Y will become overweight? And maybe sometimes some chronic drug use may be at one of the reasons for that. I think this is an overall conclusion. These are so different aspects. I think the majority have been discussed. Lifestyle factors, circulating hormones, that all contribute to overweight and obesity. And as you can see from this slide, visceral obesity, so the accumulation of fat in the belly is the most dangerous one. And if fat is accumulated in the belly, you can see it. You have entitled this session as the invisible pandemic. The pandemic is invisible, but the obesity is very, very, very visible. You just have to turn and to look to the belly, and you will see what happens with that individual. But if it is in the belly, it is also in the muscle, it is in the heart, it is in the pancreas, it's in the kidney. That is what we call ectopic fat. Fat that is accumulated in places where it normally does not belong. And that is one of the reasons of all the complications of obesity. I have two more final slides, and then I think I stay within my time. Of course, we should try to treat. If prevention comes too late, then we have to treat patients. And many years ago, we always have mentioned that 5 to 10% weight loss is good because the majority of complications are going away. But with the notice and learning that also cardiovascular mortality, cancer, sleep apnea are there, we have now learned that you should go for 15 or 20% of weight loss. And that is just a difficult point, because the next slide will show you that, of course, due to the complexity of the disease and all these hormones that are circulating, if you lose 5 or 10 kilos, a number of hormones in our circulation will react by increasing. And these are hunger hormones. And that is the reason why people, after having lost 10, 15 kilo, will very often see a rebound, unfortunately. That is still an aspect that deserves a lot of research, because we do not have a full solution for that problem. I think I can show a final slide. It's the one from my hospital where I, as I mentioned before, have been devoted 40 years of my career so far in research and care of obesity. With the final message, you only can do good research if you listen to what your patients have to tell you. And that is also an important point. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Luc van Gaal, for this very over-comprehensive presentation that outlined clearly most of the factors, I would say, or all the factors, but in scientific terms, I would say most of the factors that concur in causing obesity. I particularly love the picture on the television demonstrating that if there are frontal pack for food, we should also have frontal pack labeling for things around us, including couches, TV, Netflix, and so on, demonstrated that they unfortunately help the decrease in consumption, in this case, in burning of calories. As you said, very interesting, the Swedish studies that you have mentioned as well, the gut hormones and the microbiome, and also the chemical aspects of the biogenome that are often in the air. These are very interesting studies from the United States in the early 2000s, demonstrating how chemical substances in the air might impact on our gain of weight. You talk correctly about lifestyles and also what goes beyond the lifestyle. And you talk about what we can call exogenous circumstances, and particularly environmental circumstances, and therefore social and economic circumstances. And therefore, we believe very much that our society and our economy, so the economic lifestyle, the economic condition, are impacting on our weight. And therefore, we are very pleased to have with us today Professor Donatella Saccone from the University of Gastronomic Science. Gastronomic is more for eating, not for decreasing weight, from Pollenzo in Piedmont. And we're very happy to have you here. So please, the floor is yours. Now we have talks of 10 minutes so that we can stick into our time. So Donatella, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pietro, for the introduction. And also for the invitation on this roundtable of a so hot topic. Many interesting things have been already said. My contribution here is to put obesity in a food security framework. Next slide, please. This is because analyzing obesity in a food security framework allows to catch all its complexities and all its dimensions, and especially the main message that I will try to bring here is that, first of all, obesity as the other side of malnutrition, hunger, is always caused by a social failure. And second, that obesity must be addressed in a systemic way, considering all these dimensions, and then also policy actions should be systemic. Just to start, food security has been defined as a situation when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And it's quite clear the link between food insecurity in this case and obesity. Next slide. But what is food security? Food security is based on 4 main pillars. Okay, you can stop here. 4 main pillars. The first is food availability. That depends on domestic production and trade. Then we have access to food that can be both economic access and physical access. Economic access depend on people's income and food prices, while physical access on the quality of the infrastructure and the system of food distribution. Then we have a third pillar that is food utilization, depending on habits, diets, and healthcare. And finally, we have stability, that is the stability of the other 3 pillars over time. Next slide. Next, okay. So how these pillars of food security and these 4 dimensions of food security are linked to obesity, and which are the factors that lead for each of these pillars to obesity. First of all, in terms of food availability, a domestic food production that is more oriented to industrial and ultra-processed food can create a higher risk for obesity, as well as a high import of ultra-processed food, often favored by transnational corporations. In terms of food access, there's a factor that we must consider, that often ultra-processed food is cheaper than fresh food and unprocessed food. And this creates a big link between poverty and obesity, because people often choose unprocessed food, not because it's desirable, but simply because it's cheaper. That's what economists call inferior goods. Those goods that are selected and consumed, not because people who like, but simply because they are affordable. And then there's also a third element impeding the physical, in this case, access to fresh and unprocessed food, that has to do with the presence of food deserts, meaning areas in which there's scarce access to unprocessed food. And I will tell you something more about it. In terms of utilization, of course, when the food education is scarce, when the access to healthcare is unequal, and when we have social and cultural obsogenic norms like the trends of consuming fast food or supersized proportions, and when we have obsogenic marketing and advertising, of course, we have a higher prevalence of obesity. And also the stability, of course, in these 3 elements can create a higher risk for obesity. In this slide, I wanted to underline with the red rectangle 2 factors that, in my opinion, are often understated, underestimated, but which are crucial in order to create policies fighting obesity. The first being the link between poverty and obesity. Often we associate the idea of obesity with the idea of opulence and abundance. Actually, if we look at data, we realize that the highest increases in the obesity prevalence occur in middle-income countries, not in high-income countries. And within high-income countries, the obese people are often the poorest. And the second point is food deserts. Next slide, please. Okay, food deserts simply are those areas disadvantaged and usually impoverished, where there's no easy access to affordable and nutritious food or to affordable grocery stores. The causes are many, like a long distance to the shops, or if the shops are there, they only offer ultra-processed food or maybe fresh food, but it is not affordable. People living there, being socially disadvantaged, often do not have a vehicle to reach food markets, or public transport is not enough, is not effective for this purpose. And also there's a marginalization in terms of access to online shops because of technology access, and also because of the lack of the related distribution nets. Again, this phenomenon especially affects residential areas with a higher number of elderly people and families with low income. And while the idea of food deserts was often associated to the United States, because there, I mean, the phenomenon is quite widespread, don't think that this does not regard Europe, because the scientific literature has shown food deserts also regard European countries and especially European peripheries. Next slide. Just to conclude, I try to summarize in this slide all the policy actions that can be taken in order to address each of the dimensions of food insecurity. So for availability, access, utilization. For example, in terms of availability, it's important to stimulate the production of healthy food through incentives to food industry, to standards and quality regulations. In terms of utilization, many things have already been said. The most important thing is, of course, the education and also the awareness of people. Just in this regard, my university has launched a call in order to collect signatures to insert nutrition, food nutrition and food education in school curriculum. That is not that. And I mean, it's of fundamental importance. But if you just can click OK, I again here underline the policy options related to the two factors that I just said are often underestimated. How to break the link between obesity and poverty. Of course, we must defend purchasing power of most vulnerable groups, and also to promote safety net, like an example is the use of food stamps in order to support the consumption of fresh food. And regarding food deserts, in order to, food stamps are like buoni, in Italian buoni, that can be used, whose use is constrained to the consumption of some kinds of food. Some local food policies are already using food stamps. And in terms of food deserts, in order to fight food deserts, of course, school are a good means, because for some children, school meals represent the only safe and nutritious meal in a day. And so through canteens and also through controlling what's sold in vending machines, something can be done. And more generally, also improving the food distribution net and transport infrastructure can favor the access to markets, as well as incentivizing the development of grocery stores and farmers markets. Like in the United States, I mean, farmer markets are having a big role in this. But also the role of communities should not be disregarded, with community supporting actions, because there are some interesting initiatives at the community level for food distribution and also gardening. So I know that my time is over, but I tried to put a menu of policy actions there that can be also, I mean...
Thank you so much, Donatella.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for outlining something that perhaps is obvious among the scientific community, but in policy making is often ignored, is the relationship between obesity and the economic status and obesity, but also on the urbanization of cities. And you mentioned the food deserts that are also present in the European Union. It would be nice to understand also with food deliveries how this has been increasing or decreasing. There is a very interesting study done in the UK where it identifies that where people can go to shop on food and they have closed shops or supermarkets, the level of obesity is much lower than in those suburban area where people have to drive to get to the closest store that is usually a superstore with, as you said, a gigantic or supersized proportion. We understood in this discussion that obesity is a caloric equation about the calories that we intake and the calorie that we burn, also the quality of the calories. So I'd like to pass the floor to Ascensión Marcos from the Spanish National Research Council, who will address us on the caloric equation, decline in energy expenditure. So thank you for being here from Spain directly for the day. The floor, Ascensión, is yours.
Okay. So thank you, first of all, to the organizers for counting on me in this event, in this interesting and necessary event. So next, please. Well, next, please. Well, obesity is a multifactorial malnourished disease around the world. And well, I'm afraid I'm going to repeat some concepts. Anyway, I think that they are important concepts to bear in mind. Next, please. Well, obesity is associated with many non-communicable diseases, such as metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, cancer, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, neurodegenerative diseases, inflammatory bowel disease, atherosclerosis, autoimmune disease, asthma, and also a lot of infections and allergies. Next. All of them are diseases with low-grade inflammation. Well, according to PAHO, non-communicable diseases are the #1 cause of death and disability in the world. And also, they carry a high cost of treatment, placing a direct economic burden on health systems, households, and society as a whole. And also, they impose an indirect economic burden through a significant productivity loss via premature mortality, early labor force exits, absenteeism, and work at lowered capacity. So next, please. Obesity is also has been has been defined as an aging process. Next. And we know that obesity has been very related to higher risk to be affected by COVID-19. Indeed, obesity is a risk factor in the severity of a SARS-CoV-2 disease, and we know that 70% of obese individuals with COVID-19 required at that time intensive care and invasive mechanical ventilation. And this is also related to elderly people. But obesity is also a weighty issue for children. Next, please. So next, what weight? To what extent we can think that you are what you eat? I think that is much more than that, is much more than diet. So important to lose weight when we are overweight or obese. Next. But also important to watch our weight. So what about physical activity? Well, very important to do physical activity to reduce sedentary habits, improve fitness, but taking care of muscle injuries. And also we have to know our own limitations. So we have to do physical activity to prevent obesity, but never at any price. It's advisable to be well trained by a coach. For sure, not everybody can do the same physical activity or to have the same exercises. Please, next. So regarding sleep, already mentioned in this event, important to take into account quantity and quality, and also from the beginning, from with education for children and adolescents. Next, please. And also important how to manage our emotions, because our brain has to do a lot with the possibility to have obesity. Next, please. So very important to prevent obesity along life, to improve life quality, longevity, and also European global economy. Next, please. So the main message to take home is to add more life to years instead of more years to life. And that's all. Next one, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Asuncion, for your talk and for explaining the importance of this caloric equation. I like to, and this is something we learned together with Professor Caruba, if I refer to the city of Milano in Italy, in the 80s, actually when I was a kid, we were used to run a 3,000 meters cross-country race on an annual basis. It was for the entire city. And today, kids, so in 2023, kids were used to run only 300 meters because they were not able to run more than 300 meters. So along these 30 years, the kilometers and the meters that kids were able to run has been dramatically decreasing. And this is explaining us as well as how the burning of calories has dramatically decline. So it's probably also important to have more studies that are showing the correlation of obesity with the lower consumption of calories and consumption in terms of burning of calories by the new generation. So we are almost at the end, and we have our last speakers, and we are so happy. Has been with us many times representing Food and Drink Europe, and we heard a few times the word processed food or ultra processed food. So we like to understand the role that ultra processed foods are playing in causing or not causing obesity. So we have here with us Sara La Monaca from Food and Drink Europe, who's talking to us about the role of processed foods. Sara, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pietro. Thank you, MEP D'Amato, for the invitation. Very grateful to be here. Yes, as it was mentioned, the food and drink industry plays a crucial role in supporting and promoting healthier diets. So, as Pietro said, I want to focus in my intervention on the role of processed foods that are being often stigmatized, especially via the classification, the category of ultra-processed foods that is very much used today, and I heard several speakers using the UPF, let's say, classification. So I would like to focus on the positive role that processed foods and foods and drinks bring for healthcare living. So first of all, food processing is any method that is used to turn agricultural products and ingredients into edible, safe, and nutritious food. And almost all food require processing to some degree in order to be digestible, to be safe, and also to be available all year around. In terms of benefits, processed foods, they bring benefits not only for healthier diets, but also now we're talking about more sustainable diets. There are also benefits for the environment. So when we talk about healthier diets, of course, what comes to mind, and also what is at the core, let's say, of the business of the food and drink industry, is the formulation, so product formulation, but also product innovation. And this is where the industry plays a critical role in promoting healthier diets. So if we think about product fortification, so enhancement of the composition of the product by adding vitamins or minerals, and so this is one of the let's say tools that the industry has to improve product composition, but it's also about, as I mentioned, about formulating recipes and innovating recipes, so to reduce certain nutrients like sugars, salt, fat, or adding some ingredients or nutrients, so whole grain, fiber, fruit and vegetables. Then there is the role of processing when it's about delivering foods that is specialized foods, so foods that support specific dietary needs of specific groups of the population. If we think about infant formula, if we think about products for weight management, but also, for instance, foods and drinks for sport people, and also food for medical purposes, so to support people who are recovering or going through an illness. And then there is preservation, so adding preservatives, but also some processing techniques like freezing, canning, drying. These are all processing methods that help to make food safer for a long time, but also, and this is where I want to touch about the environmental benefits also of food processing, extending the shelf life. So today we're talking about reducing food waste, and food processing in this sense helps to reduce food waste. It has been mentioned several times, ultra-processed foods, and how this terminology is very much used today. The classification of ultra-processed food, it's not really fit for purpose. We have a societal concern that it's about obesity, it's about the unhealthy lifestyle, it's about overconsumption of foods that are high in fat, sugar, salt, but this has to be decoupled from the discussion around the level of processing, because there is a growing body of research that shows that there is no enough evidence to support a cause-effect relationship between the level of processing, so the degree of processing, and negative health outcomes. So last year, for instance, it was the Nordic Nutrition Council working on a revision of the Nordic nutrition recommendations. They looked at the literature on ultra-processed foods, with the purpose of considering whether to introduce in the Nordic nutrition recommendations a recommendation on the consumption of ultra-processed foods, and they came to the conclusion that the evidence is not robust enough to provide a recommendation, because the current, let's say, classifications that are based on the nutritional value of the products are sufficient, and there is no enough evidence that support a cause-effect relationship between degree of processing and negative health outcomes. And this was actually also the finding of the UK Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition that delivered a statement in July 2023, basically arriving at the same conclusion. So it is the final, like in terms of nutritional value, composition of the product that matters, that has to be seen, of course, also in the context of the lifestyle, the diet, also the frequency of consumption, and the classification of ultra-processed food can be also confusing for consumers. And this has been shown by surveys conducted among consumers, because it can have unintended consequences. It's difficult for consumers, but also some research carried out among experts, also for experts to classify products according to this classification. So there are products that are actually products that should be part of a balanced diet, like whole grain bread, that can be caught up in the ultra-processed food classification. So it can have unintended consequences, hampering public health goals in terms of diets and nutrition. So this is to say that this classification does not address in an accurate way the concerns that we have about overconsumption of certain nutrients. We should look at we should decouple the two discussions. And when it comes then to solutions, then there are better solutions, rather than looking at the level of processing to address the issue of healthy and more sustainable diets. And these are mentioned before. It's about innovation and reformulation. It's about education. Education has several facets. It's about consumer information, so labeling, which can be on pack, off pack. It's about nutrition education, which is the role, of course, of governments and public authorities. And also it's about awareness campaigns. Actually, in this regard, there are great examples at national level that, as Food Drink Europe, we have always trying to showcase, like the whole grain partnership in Denmark, that should be scaled up at EU level, because it's a great example of several actors coming from industry, academy, public authorities working together to try to increase the intake of whole grain in the Danish population. And they had amazing results over a time frame of 15 years. Then it's about portion sizes and portion guidance. That was also mentioned previously as an important tool. It's about a decent and truthful marketing and advertising. We can all agree that the marketing and advertising, especially to kids, has to be responsible. And there are several initiatives that have been going on since years, self-regulatory initiatives undertaken by the food and drink industry in this regard. And then finally, it's about, this was said, about healthy lifestyle. So it's also a discussion that has to take into account other elements that go beyond dietary intake and take into account lifestyle in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, very much. We're almost close to the end. I have a very few minutes for any question or comment or doubt or clarification that you need. We have very distinguished speakers here. If there is any question also from home, I see there are few people connected. So unless otherwise, I think we can go to the conclusion. If Rosa allows me, I can give the conclusion and then give the floor to you. Thank you very much, particularly to our speakers, Asuncion Marcos, for being here with us, to Donatella and to Sarah for joining us, to Professor Van Gaal for joining us, and the same for Professor Karuba. Some of you also had to travel to be here, so I want to thank you with my heart. I want to thank Rosa D'Amato, of course, and the Parliament. The Parliament is the house of people, the house that represents people, and always a privilege to be here and to represent some of the main concerns that are affecting or that people might have. Being the house of people is also the house of diversity. And we understand that Europe and the world and human beings are all diverse. And we understood that obesity is a problem that has to do with more than what we eat, has to do with our DNA, with our biology, our metabolism, and also with the way we live our lifestyles. And I would say that if we count the reasons behind obesity, we probably end up to 8 billion reasons. That means 8 billion of us. It means 8 billion reasons behind obesity. That's why policymakers and wise policymaking should try to include all these different poses of obesity. And we understood today it's a multi-factor issue, it's a multi-factor problem. Cannot be solved with one solution, cannot be solved with one front-to-pack label, but it should be solved with more effective and broader policies. And I think that today, and I want to thank the speakers, you outlined some of the possible solution, and hopefully next Parliament and next Commission will also include in their policy making and their what we call the policy book some of these solutions. As a liberal policy institute with a very free market base and a liberal base, we would like to empower consumers. So to give the consumers the power to figure out what their lifestyle should be, and governments should be here to support this freedom with one key factor, that is knowledge. And once you have knowledge and once you grow knowledge and information, you can grow awareness, and through awareness make the right choice for you that is also a free choice. We understood that if we give a cube of sugar to each of us today, right now, the impact of that cube of sugar will be dramatically different because of the way we are, the lifestyle we follow, because of our DNA. And therefore, it's important that policies are considering these aspects. And we also want to make sure that the next Commission, particularly, and the Parliament, we work together to avoid unintended consequences. For instance, when it comes to what Sarah mentioned about ultra-processed food or processed food, it could be sometimes easy classification, but at the same time, it's a very confusing classification when it comes to policy making. The same when it comes to front-to-pack label, they might be simple to understand, but at the same time, they might mislead consumers. And in other words, not provide sufficient knowledge to consumer. We believe that consumer should also fail if by failing they learn and they produce knowledge. We also believe that shouldn't be government telling people what to do, but should be consumers to make their own free choice based on the knowledge that they are able to grow. You touch upon many issues, and I like to go back to Sarah as the last speakers to the question of the dose and the portion. The portion is definitely one of the main issues. And as an Italian, I'm also very proud that there was a partnership between government in the past and the industry to have small snacks. And when you go to the supermarket, you have the small snack, and it's also called in our culture as the merendina, is the small snack, because there was the agreement of making small portions in order to allowing kids to consume that, but in small portion. But of course, somebody can disagree and say, well, but if they eat more small portion, that makes a big portion. The same is when you have the Nutri-Score and you see green, and you might eat a lot of greens, that probably makes a red as well. But we're not here today to talk about the Nutri-Score, but we're here also to outline the fact that if it's a lifestyle issue that includes more aspects, we should probably pursue also and investigate with more attention the personalization of diet. That is definitely a new trend, and the fact that new technology and the new advancement in scientific research are allowing people to understand each moment of our life, how many calories are we taking and how many calories are we burning. And that's certainly an empowerment of all the objects that we have around and are providing relevant information. When Professor Karuba earlier mentioned the number of steps, I saw that MEP D'Amato was checking her number of steps on her watch, and she probably figured out she did enough today. That's why we have to close so you can go and take a walk. And artificial intelligence can be as well a great option. As we've told several times, in real time, you know what kind of nutrients you need right now and how much you're consuming and what you need based on your future lifestyle. If I'm going to the gym tonight, probably my watch or my telephone will be able to tell me what I need to eat. This to us is a very important, empowering tool if we think about IoT and artificial intelligence, but at the same time, it is also a matter of concern. If on one side, we don't want governments to tell us what to eat, on the other side, we don't want a robot or an algorithm to tell us what to eat. But it's worth investigating. That's why we called the Commission lately to say, hey, stop wasting time on front-of-pack labeling. There are new technologies coming, and it's better. Europe is going to investigate this technology to make sure that will be a tool to empower people and not to guide our choices. Thank you so much for being here with us. I leave the floor to Rosa D'Amato, and thanks very much because this is one of the last events. So we should be very, very proud to be part of this last moment and jubileum of celebration. So floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pietro. I have a lot of questions to the experts. For example, how many steps we need every day? And I'm not sure that we need in one solution. I'm a gym teacher. I think it is better for 30 minutes, 40 minutes altogether, but is in my opinion, I want to confront with you. And I have also a question about the pollution, the role of pollution, the air quality, but also about the quality of our food. I have a lot of questions about the role of pesticide, for example. And also about some question about the food intolerance or allergy, and why our child has a lot of intolerance and allergy to a lot of food, nutrients. And I think we need another event. I not know with me or other MEPs of Green Party, because we need a confront between researchers, between doctors and the industry about the processed or ultra-processed food, because it is an issue. I don't know, for industry is not an issue, is an opportunity we need to confront. But I know that in Italian meaning, the diet have a bad meaning, no? It's good to talk about meal plan. Your meal plan is different from mine, no? For example. It is also in which way we talk with to the people, to the children, to the family, to the parents is important. So we can say that we need to need determined, and I think all the people that are here have a commitment to be in the next European Parliament and the next European Commission, because also the European Commission changed, probably the Council no, we don't know, and to take at the same table parents, teachers, doctors, researchers, policymakers, all the governments, and all together understand in which way, in a holistic way, we can tackle the disease that is obesity. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your experience and your competence.